From the Babylonians to the Greeks to the hippies of the 1960s, the Aquarius constellation has held symbolic meaning through it all. Likely because Aquarius would rise over the horizon at the beginning of the rainy season in many parts of the world, it is almost always associated with water of some sort. So, some cultures come to view it in the hope that it would bring good harvest, while others took it as a negative omen indicating the possibility of damaging floods in the near future. However, in more modern times, you may hear Aquarius associated with people who have personalities that are eccentric, friendly, intelligent, and independent thinkers. The idea of Aquarius can mean vastly different things to many different people. For instance, on the scientific side of things, astronomers view this constellation as the area of the sky containing 11 stars officially named by the IAU, 3 Messier objects, the famous TRAPPIST-1 system, and several spectacular galaxies and nebulas to explore. The Aquarius constellation contains a treasure trove of knowledge, much of which has yet to be discovered. So in this video is everything you need to know about the Aquarius constellation. My name is Abby. Welcome back to my channel. This is Abby's Amateur Astronomy, a channel where we just try to learn about some stars. So let's begin by learning how to even find Aquarius in the night sky. If you're in the northern hemisphere like me, the best time to view Aquarius is going to be in the autumn, so in September, October, November timeframe. Now, Aquarius is a very dim constellation. Honestly, it's really hard to pick out, so you're going to want the darkest skies that you can possibly get. And even then, I find it still hard to pick out the actual shape of the constellation. I'm usually just happy if I can find the right region of sky. If you're in the northern hemisphere like me, the easiest way to find him is face south, and as you look up, try to find the Capricornus constellation first. So Capricornus makes this really distinctive W shape. Again, he's pretty dim, but its stars make up such a distinct shape that it's much easier for me to find that constellation first before Aquarius. So once you find Capricornus and you see the W, you're going to want to look to the left of the W. And depending upon when you look, the W might be tilted, but imagine if you're reading it, the area that will be to the left. So if it's like this, it'll be more up. Anyways, there'll be a really dark region of sky, and Aquarius is actually in that region. So if you want to pick out the constellation itself, there are going to be 4 bright-ish stars that will make this Y shape, and the Y shape will be pointing towards the bottom of the W. And what that Y shape ends up being is the legs of Aquarius. So the legs go down whichever orientation the Y is, branch off from the Y, and then if you go up and arch around, that'll be the head and the bucket and the pouring of the water. The region of sky that Aquarius is located in is sometimes called the sea because it has a bunch of other different water related constellations. We have Pisces, which is a fish, we'll have Aradnus, which is a river, and Cetus, which is a whale. So, as I mentioned earlier, Aquarius is a really faint constellation. It actually only has 2 stars with a magnitude of less than 3. So the brightest star is actually Beta Aquarii, which is a yellow supergiant star with a magnitude of 2.87. It's about 540 light years away and thought to be 2,200 times more luminous than our sun, with about 6 times the mass. And it is also thought to be a multi-star system. The second brightest star is Alpha Aquarii. It is a G-type yellow supergiant star that's about 3,000 times more luminous than our sun, but it has an apparent magnitude of 2.95. The closest star to us in the Aquarius constellation is called EZ Aquarii. It's only 11.27 light years away, and it's thought to be a triple star system of N-type dwarf stars. In total, Aquarius has 11 named stars recognized by the IAU, or International Astronomical Union, most of which commonly go by their Arabic name, which has something to do with luck in the meaning. Hidden behind the stars of this constellation are 3 Messier objects. M2 is a globular star cluster first discovered by Jean-Dominique Maraldi in 1746 while he was studying a comet. Thought to be around 13 billion years old, it's one of the oldest clusters surrounding the Milky Way galaxy. It contains 150,000 stars, including 21 variables, and has a diameter of 175 light years, making it one of the biggest of its kind. Globular star clusters, by the way, are clumpings of stars that are spherical in shape and held together by gravity and are often found surrounding galaxies. They contain some of the oldest stars in the universe, and the stars can live to be in the billions of years old. The next Messier object we're going to talk about is Messier 72, which is also a globular star cluster. Located 53,000 light years away, estimates put the age of this cluster to be around 9.3 billion years old, and it contains around 42 variable stars. It was first discovered by Pierre Messier in 1780, who was a colleague of Charles Messier. Messier then added this object into his list of nebula just a couple months later. But it wasn't until 1783, when William Herschel was looking at the object, that he was able to resolve its individual stars and determine it wasn't a nebula, but in fact a cluster. On the other hand, the third Messier object we're going to talk about is Messier 72. It was thought to be an open star cluster until around 2002, when a study came out that showed that the stars were actually not connected by gravity and were moving in different directions, which just makes this an asterism. This object was first discovered by Charles Messier in 1780, and he put a note in his catalog saying there was little nebulosity to it, but later astronomers like William Herschel found no such evidence of that trait. Aquarius has other stunning deep space objects located in the constellation as well. The Saturn Nebula gets its name from its oblong shape that kind of has a resemblance to our solar system's planet, Saturn. However, this has nothing to do with planets. It's actually thought to have formed when a low-mass star evolved into a red giant star and started shedding its layers. It gets its fantastic coloring from when that inner core started shooting off ultraviolet radiation, and that radiation interacted with the cloud of particles. And that core is slowly turning into a white dwarf star. This was first discovered by William Herschel in 1782 and is located about 1,400 light years away. It has an luminosity of about 20 suns and an apparent magnitude of 11.5. It's also thought to be around 5,500 Kelvin in temperature. The Helix Nebula, also sometimes known as the Eye of God, was the first planetary nebula discovered to have what's called cometary knots. These are tadpole-shaped gaseous features that are thought to be formed during the final stages of the star's life. This nebula was first spotted by Carl Ludwig Harding in the late 19th century and is sitting 650 light years away. It has a 2.5 light year diameter surrounding a stellar core that is turning into a white dwarf star. This actually resembles the Cat Eye Nebula, which I talked about in my Draco constellation video. The Atoms for Peace galaxy is going to be the last large deep space object I'm going to talk about, and it sits 220 million light years away with an apparent magnitude of 12.7. Some people think that this galaxy resembles an electron cloud surrounding the nucleus of an atom, and so there it gets its name from Dwight D. Eisenhower's 1953 speech called Atoms for Peace. When observing this object, what we're actually seeing is two different disk galaxies merging into each other. Astronomers will use this object to study how the merging of such galaxies will affect the evolution of the universe. They'll also use what they learn here as kind of a blueprint of what could possibly happen when the Andromeda and Milky Way galaxy eventually merge together. Now, we can't talk about the Aquarius constellation without talking about the TRAPPIST-1 planetary star system. Now, this whole system kind of deserves its own video. There's so much to talk about. But if you're not aware, TRAPPIST-1 is probably the most studied planetary system outside of our own solar system. And it became famous in 2017 when it was discovered that there were 7 rocky planets orbiting this ultra-cool dwarf star. Now, of those 7, 4 of those lie within the habitable zone, and that just means that the temperatures on the surfaces of those planets can support liquid water. And this makes the TRAPPIST-1 system a key target for the research that's ongoing looking for life outside of our solar system. In fact, JWST has started studying the possible atmospheres around these planets, and it started taking measurements using the NIRSpec instrument on board, but no studies have been published yet. If you're interested in learning more, NASA actually has a really cool 3D rendering of what the surface of TRAPPIST-1D might look like, and a guided tour of what it would be like to travel to TRAPPIST-1E. I'll leave the links below in the description. So now I'm going to go over a couple of the myths surrounding the Aquarius constellation. Now, these are going to be very brief summaries that I have. I'm not going to go in detail into every single myth out there. I'm going to leave lots of things out, but I'll try to leave links below if you're interested in the full-length versions of the story. So the earliest on-record myth of Aquarius comes from the Sumerian civilization in Mesopotamia. They refer to this constellation as Gula, Gu.La, which translates into the Great One and is thought to represent the god Ea. Ea is also referred to as Enki. I think Enki is the Sumerian name and Ea is the Babylonian name, but it's really the same god, so I'll be using the names interchangeably. But no matter what his name is, he is the god of knowledge, crafts, creation, and of course, water. He is most often depicted with an overflowing basin of water and is one of the main characters in the Deluge myth. This myth is the oldest flood myth to exist in the world. So as the story goes, Enlil wants to punish humanity for disturbing his rest or something like that, and he wants to punish them by giving them a giant flood. Secretly, Enki teaches this hero Atrahasis how to build this big boat that he can put his family and other living creatures on in order to survive this flood. A lot of scholars think that this is the prelude to Noah's Ark, so you'll see a lot of similarities between these two stories. Now, Atrahasis and his family are able to survive this flood. It lasts for 7 days, and he eventually releases a swallow, a raven, and a dove to search for land to see if the waters have receded, which they had, and then he was able to take the boat onto land safely. Now, meanwhile, Enki eventually convinces Enlil that his punishment on humanity was way too harsh and unjust, so their conversation eventually leads into the other gods instituting measures that will limit population in the future. Now, to the ancient Egyptians, the Aquarius constellation represented the god Hapi of the Nile River. When the Nile River floods every year, it was thought to be the arrival of Hapi, and he was celebrated for fertilizing the farmlands around the banks of the rivers with the silt that would lead to better harvests and more crops for the people. He was also considered the father of the gods and oftentimes symbolized fertility and wisdom, and he was thought to help the balance of the cosmos. In Greek mythology, Aquarius is thought to represent the character Ganymede. Ganymede is the son of a Trojan king, and he caught the eye one day of Zeus. So Zeus kidnapped him, brought him up to Mount Olympus, and wanted Ganymede to work for him as a cupbearer. And a cupbearer is just someone who brings the gods water or ambrosia whenever they request it. Now, one day Ganymede was kind of fed up of being treated like a servant, and it was said to take all of the water and ambrosia on Mount Olympus and pour it out. Now, all of that liquid fell to earth and caused massive devastation and massive floods. And this little protest seemed to work on Zeus, because then he seemed later to change his mind and agree that maybe he was treating Ganymede unfairly, and as a reward immortalized him in the sky as Aquarius. So from these myths, we learn that Aquarius kind of has both a good connotation and a bad connotation in the eyes of the ancient civilizations. He's often, through the myths, he is always the one to bring water, and sometimes it's the water of the rainy season or annual floods that will help enrich the soil and feed the crops and lead to good harvests, and therefore he is celebrated. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of myths of him bringing on a great flood, causing a lot of damage and devastation. But one thing that's common is that when Aquarius appears in the sky, rain and water are to follow soon after. So Aquarius is actually one of the oldest ever recorded constellations, and yes, it was one of the 12 zodiacs that were officially recorded by the Babylonians, but one source that I found put the popularization of this constellation much earlier than that. So some think that there's a proto-Aquarius constellation that popped up around 2500 BC, and you can kind of see it on some of the cylinder seals from that time. Now, this predates the Babylonian civilization, and it's in the very early stages of the Sumerian civilization. But it actually makes sense that this constellation would have developed during that time frame, because actually Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio would have made up the 4 cardinal points along the ecliptic during those years. However, the earliest officially recorded documentation of Aquarius as we know Aquarius was in about 1100 BC by the Babylonians. And this record is called the 3 Stars Each Tablets, that actually contains all 12 zodiac constellations. Now, how this early star system kind of worked was the Babylonians divided the sky into 3 sections. There was the Way of Enlil, which contained the northern sky. There was the Way of Anu, which contained the equator and half of the zodiac. And then there was the Way of Ea, which contained the southern sky. Now, obviously, because Aquarius was named after the god of Ea, Aquarius was in the Way of Ea. These divisions were actually really close to the 17-degree north and 17-degree south divisions. And what that means is the sun would spend almost exactly 3 months in each way before moving on. So as the Babylonian civilization progressed, they started having more interactions with the neighboring ancient civilizations. That includes the Greeks, that includes the Arabics, and that includes the ancient Egyptians. So that is how the old zodiac constellations, including Aquarius, spread throughout the multiple cultures, and that's eventually how we got Aquarius today. So in the 2nd century, Ptolemy, who was a Roman astronomer, published his really famous textbook called The Alchemist, and what this did was it popularized the idea of a geocentric universe. Now, this textbook became the basis of astronomy for the next, 1,000 years, but in it he listed a bunch of stars. He listed over 1,000 stars, the relative brightness, the relative locations, and 48 constellations. And of course, one of these constellations was Aquarius. Now, this is important because this is how the constellations, at least in the Western world, kind of became official. And actually, Ptolemy's 48 constellations were some of the first recognized by the IAU, again, the International Astronomical Union. Obviously, they've added more over time. I think now there's 88 official constellations recognized by the IAU, but those initial 48 from Ptolemy is how Aquarius ended up being an official constellation.
This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
Now, in more modern times, we hear Aquarius more often referenced in terms of astrology. And if you don't know, astrology is the pseudoscience interpretation of how stars and planets move and their relative locations to each other, and how that affects individual people on Earth and humanity as a whole. And so you hear a lot like the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and this was actually popularized in the 1960s with the counterculture hippie movement of the time. This movement stood for freedom of expression, anti-consumerism, and was very strongly against war and violence. It's often characterized by young people growing out their hair really long, doing drugs, listening to rock and roll music, protesting the Vietnam War, and being very friendly and open. And this shift in culture was actually completely opposite to what the establishment of the time was post-World War I in the 1950s and early 1960s. So the age of Aquarius is referring to the astrological age. And I did a little bit of research. An astrological age is thought to be 1/12 of one precession of the Earth. So Earth is on an axis, means it's tilt, but it kind of wobbles a little bit. And one rotation of that wobble is thought to be a precession. So 1/12 of that is an age in astrology, and that roughly equals, was it 2,160 years. So why it's 1/12 of a precession is because supposedly that's the amount of time it takes for the vernal equinox to move from one constellation to the next. So the age of Aquarius is when the vernal equinox enters the Aquarius constellation in the sky. Now, some astrologers thought that this was happening in the 1960s or 1970s. It's actually a really highly debated topic amongst astrologers of when the age of Aquarius starts. Half of them think it happened already. Half of them think that we're not even close and we're still in the age of Pisces awaiting the age of Aquarius. But nonetheless, the idea that the civilization was entering the age of Aquarius was very popular in the 1960s. What this supposedly means for humanity is that we will take control of Earth, and in doing so, take control of our own destiny. And what comes with that is an expansion of consciousness and higher rates of enlightened people that will eventually lead to harmony in the world. So if you were born sometime between January 20th and February 18th, it is said that your astrological star sign is an Aquarius. And according to astrologers, like the annual floods bringing aid to the farmers in the ancient civilizations, you are of the most humanitarian of the star signs. But you are also said to be free-spirited, eccentric, stubborn, and you hate small talk. Well, there you have it. There's everything that I know about the Aquarius constellation. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you found most interesting about Aquarius. Did you know that it was as old as it was? Because I didn't. But I'm sure I left a bunch of details out, so if there's anything that was missing in this video, please, again, leave it below. I would love to learn more, and I'm sure the other people watching would love to learn more. And yeah, if you feel like it, subscribe. It'll be great. And I'll see you next time.